Welcome back to the Quiet Onset podcast powered by Cineman. Today, I'm joined by Lachlan Teely.
This podcast series or this channel, whatever you want to call it, is kind of like marriage. In sickness and in health, I will power through to give my feedback on anything. And I guess today we're doing the Game of Thrones prequel spin-off.
Exactly. House of the Dragon Season 1. We got our spoiler thoughts right here. But before we do get into full-on spoilers, Lachlan, we've all watched Game of Thrones. If you haven't already, what are you doing here? Go watch the first few seasons of Game of Thrones. It fell off. But Lachlan, in 15 seconds, could you quickly go over seasons 1 through 7 of Game of Thrones and give us your 1 out of 10 rating for all of them? Yes, season 1, Lachlan. Rating.
My gosh. Season 1 was a good, a 7 out of 10.
Season 2?
7 as well.
3?
3, my god, I'm trying to remember what happened in the show. Season 3, I think... you're really quizzing me here.
I didn't.
I'm also going to give it.
I
don't remember much of 1 to 3, but season 4, I'm pretty sure was where it really gets to start going. So again, season 3 is a 7,
and season 4 then I guess goes higher.
Season 4 is going to get an 8. I had no idea we were doing this. Hang on, I'm trying to get episodes up on. Well,
the point of it was that you snap just from your impression.
Oh hell no! Hang on. Season 4. Hang on, wait. No. Season 3. Season 3. No. Some cool shit in this season. Okay. Oh god. Ranger Casimir. Okay. No. It gets season 3 gets like a 7.5.
All right. Season 4.
Season 4 is a solid 8.5. Great little fight between the Viper and the Mountain.
Does it get better in season 5?
Season 5. I would say season 5 was a bit of a miss, unfortunately. I think there's only really got 1 or 2 episodes in there, so I'm going to give it a 7.
And season 6?
Season 6, I think, is the best season from my memory, just because there's a number of great episodes, but also it is the episode that has, the season that has Battle of the Bastards in it.
It does, yeah. And then, was season 7 the final one, or did they do a season 8?
No, season 7 was, unfortunately, it's pretty much its downfall, but I will say this, some great twists in season 7, especially right at the end, and so I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10.
And then the final season?
10 out of 10, best season of Game of Thrones ever, best series of all time, highest rated episode of 4.0 stars out of 10 for the final episode, based on 25,000 reviews on Letterboxd. It's 25,000, 250,000, I should say. I didn't say 20. I said 250,000.
Wow, that's a lot of reviews.
Yeah, just not do season 8. Don't do season 8.
The reason I'm asking you this in this very convoluted, overlong bit was, I guess, going into season 1. I don't know when you started to watch Game of Thrones. I think I started around when the show was on season 5, I think. And comparing that to the launch obviously goes into with Game of Thrones already being out there. But I think this first season of House of the Dragons, for me, really stands out as being really solid already. And it feels more like a game plan is already kind of, a roadmap is out there for where they want to end up. And I don't see this going for 8 seasons. I think it's more of like maybe a 3 to 4, maybe 5 season show. Logan, how do you feel about that?
I could definitely see it being 3 seasons at most. I don't think I want it to go for much longer than that, because they've already done a lot of time jumping in this season, so they can't really do much more of that. It's really going to have to slow down and tell some really interesting stories, and hopefully that's going to be it's going to help the show more. Because I think for me, the show's biggest flaw so far is how quickly it just moves past events. And while a decent amount of them hold a bit of weight to them, it's nothing compared to what Game of Thrones did. Because, more years have passed in House of Dragon than almost the entire series of Game of Thrones. So, that's 1 season, and it's basically almost been 2-3 decades, closer to 2 decades, I would say.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
in one season where Game of Thrones was set over the course of what could have been, maybe 10 years at most.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just the thing. I think that there's some quotes out there from, I don't remember who, if it was the showrunner or if it was actually George Martin, who said that. Who, by the way, said I think he's 2/3 through the next book he's writing. I'm just gonna doubt
That's
that
never
it's
coming.
releasing
Never coming.
anytime soon. Someone said that this story of the Targaryens is like a part of like 150-year long or 350-year long reign, a long reign, and you really are just getting a glimpse into that. And that's like the special thing with TV shows or shows in general or media in general. You get attached to characters, and I don't see here that they rock pull a bunch of characters out from under us. But from my understanding, it's that's really there's a bunch of like turnovers when it comes to who sits on the Iron Throne in the history of the Targaryens. It's very messy, which makes me really keen to see more of this world because I've been entranced in it for the whole 10 episode series so far. And Lachlan, I think there's no more point in not getting into specifics when it comes to House of the Dragon. So here's your spoiler warning for season 1 of the show. And Lachlan, just overall, how would you, I guess, go about describing this season and where it maybe succeeds and where it falls short?
It nailed it. I have to admit that I kind of fell off watching it
Hmm.
weekly, probably about episode 4, because I
Right.
was watching both House of Dragon and Lord of the Rings, which we
Yeah.
obviously recently reviewed as well.
Hmm.
Uh, and watching both of those shows, both being very long form, 1 hour episodes each, pretty much. And both of them throw a lot at you, a lot of names,
Yeah.
a lot of places. It was just too much to take in, so I decided to stop watching House of Dragon until it finished because out
Hmm.
of the two, I felt that House of Dragon was the one that I wanted to watch and enjoy the most, so I waited essentially.
Right.
And I'm glad I did because I find the start of the series to be unfortunately quite slow, but
Hmm.
my god, does the final like 4 episodes just absolutely nail what I wanted
Hmm.
to see, and it was just spectacular. So it's unfortunate that it was a slow start, and it might have lost a number of viewers because of that. But if you stuck along for the ride, it is closing out on some really good television, like really
Hmm.
good. It's kind of like those it was kind of like they've taken the best aspects of Game of Thrones and what made it succeed and took those ideas and were just like, let's go with it. Which can be unfortunate. I don't know about you, Ewan. Did you have times where you kind of went, "Ah, that's very uh, Daenerys Targaryen of her," or that Alicent is very much getting a lot of Cersei vibes? Because I had a number of times where I was like, "This kind of feels like
Hmm.
a copy and paste moment from Game of Thrones," but there's only
There's
so
a,
much
yeah.
emotional range that you can do when
Hmm.
everyone's goal is the same, and that's to be the one whose ass is on the Iron Throne. So I don't hold
Yeah.
it. I don't hold it against the show, but it's just something that came up in my head where I was like, oh yeah, Cersei was, the queen consort, and
Hmm.
she had this kid that was a little shit and dearly loved the child,
Yeah.
similar to Alicent, and that kid was going to be king, and that king's a little shit, and you know, do you love me? And she slaps him, and Cersei did the same thing. So like, there's some aspects that I saw in some of these characters that I saw in Game of Thrones, but again, we're talking about a show that had 8 seasons versus the first season of a series, so there's probably going to be some similar aspects to it.
Now, I think what makes the difference, obviously, I think those character types are similar. I never thought of that, honestly. It didn't remind me of them, but now that you pointed out, I guess it's there. I also saw some meme out there of like the second to last episode where the dragon busts in and it plays side by side with like a Shrek moment when I saw her face, and it goes in. It's like, the internet is just I've seen
Good meme.
that like in a TikTok 20 different times, and I like the first time it's to me it was mildly funny. The 20th time I've seen it, it's like, holy shit, is no one creative on social media? Do they just like regurgitate whatever someone puts out? It's so glad that I brought it up here again, so you can even consume more of that like singular one joke meme. But uh anyways, I think what makes House of the Dragon so different to me is that it's way more contained in that sense, that it's mainly taking place in King's Landing for the first few episodes that, like you said, are really slow. But I think that's essential for the back end of the season, especially like however King Viserys ties into the whole story and how it's about like the the emotional relationships that some of the antagonizing parties have against each other, and it's way less fought out in wars that are kind of we lead up to in Game of Thrones. And I think that Daenerys' claim to the throne was always going to result in some kind of violent action and war, and I don't think that in this first season we are really building up to that. We're trying to avoid it at all costs, and ultimately I guess there's no way of avoiding it anymore. But not by a lack of effort for from the leading ladies, at least, to keep that from happening, which made it so interesting to me. And it has that female-centered focus without shoehorning in a story that doesn't feel like it has its place of just having female characters that have backbone and they have something to say. And obviously, hopefully, the show stands the Bechdel test by, of course, like all of that stuff. It worked really well, and I thought that there were just so many characters that I'm so invested in for like a bunch of reasons. And I just really like how they're all like flawed in their own sense, have their ambitions, but their ambitions might also be undercut because then they have maybe they're impatient, or then they have some sympathy for like it gets really complicated really quickly. And I envy you for not being able to wait, because I think this series works super well if you binge it, especially because it's so complicated, especially because there's so many characters. And I did feel lost, especially for the time jump when there's a bunch of children popping up, as well as like we do time jumps with these children as well. So like I see a baby version of someone, and then they're grown up, and then they're even older, and it gets a bit confusing. But I think it is essential that we don't get flashbacks to anything, and we maybe like start with them when Aemond is already like, I don't know how old he is, like 15 or 16. I'm glad they structured it the way that they did, and I think going forward we'll definitely won't be seeing like much of time skips anymore. I think we're probably going to stay in the same time period for the rest of the show.
I guess you could see season one as a massive setup, and it needed to establish who these characters are and
Yeah,
their place in this world. You can't really establish a whole world in the span of a year. These kind of
yeah,
big fights that they're trying to lead up to isn't something that just happens overnight. It's something that
exactly.
builds and builds and builds. 'Cause if you think
Hmm.
about, obviously, like the biggest battle that I really remember in Game of Thrones, they were all towards the end because they had all these seasons to build up to it. So obviously they're leading to a war, and you're not going to get that in the first season. But they've done a
Hmm.
smart thing where they've built these relationships with these characters. The two obviously being Alicent and Rhaenyra as children, as best
Yeah.
friends, and how that relationship drifted away, and obviously then the relationship that drifted away and Driftwood's relationship with the Red Keep, obviously being
Yeah,
that's a great segue. Thank you. I'll appreciate if you say it's a good segue. Yeah, thank
it's
you.
amazing.
Um, so Driftmark, sorry, not Driftwood.
Yeah,
Driftmark.
I wasn't sure if that's like the correct, but again,
Oh
there's
my
too
god, there's
many
so many
names to
names.
be
Again, there's
sure.
so many names. Obviously, there's all these relationships that you have to build, and they don't build in a matter of a year. They build in a matter of years. So
Hmm.
having the first time jump take 10 years, and then that be midway through the season, That's when you can seriously start building some sort of relationship. Now, then you meet these two women who are now mothers, and their priorities are different. They need to take care of their kin and their family.
Hmm.
So it's no longer about personal ambition of, Rhaenyra always going to be queen. She now has a duty to do motherly roles, and it's the same with Alicent, which she's kind of gone from I'm a mother now to I'm a ruler now. So then
Yeah.
you obviously have the time jump to 6 years past that, where it starts to be, I guess, the the kids and their relationship. And I guess the one thing you can take from season one is don't have kids because they fuck everything up.
They do fuck everything up. Yeah, I
They
mean
fuck
it's
everything
the
up.
that's the reason they'll go to war because from Rhaenyra's point, she really wasn't, I guess, at a place where she would start a war. She was waiting for action to be taken. Uh, I don't know. How did you feel about them sending the kids off to do like the diplomacy riding on the dragons? You know, to go there.
Cool. So
Did that?
jumping straight to
Yeah,
the end. Yes,
yeah.
I
I
thought
want to
that was a
talk
cool
about.
idea because, like, it was obviously okay. So obviously having uh Renee's kids, like her bastard
This
children, I guess we should say,
about.
they going off was obviously a big thing because the focus of the previous episodes were all about being a mother in a sense
Hmm.
where she still had her urgency to be the queen next in line on the Iron Throne, but it switched it to her being a mother and
Yeah.
her being able to let go of these children, to let them be men, to let them do this thing on her behalf was a big thing. And because she did that and now her kid is dead, uh
Not just
my god,
one,
was that the
losing
coolest.
two children in that episode.
She lost two children?
Yeah, she was
Oh wait,
pregnant
yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah,
had
yeah,
the
yeah.
baby, which was Jesus Christ, what a like they should put up a trigger warning before the start of that episode for people who have suffered through that. That was it was hard to watch. I mean, yeah, it was really an incredible moment for her of needing to stand tall, really solidifying her as like not someone to be messed with, but also this very tragic character who's has always been under scrutiny in a way and needing to prove herself. And basically, once you got someone on the throne, they obviously don't want anyone else who would have claim to the throne. So it's more like it's almost like, oh my god, he's making the connection to the real world. You got a system that puts people against each other, not the people themselves, which, like, even in this medieval time show about knights and queens and dragons, it feels amazing to have like that grounded thing in there where they're kind of forced into places and how they work around that. And obviously we like the Shichi Boom Boom and a bunch of Dracarys dragons, going at it. But yeah, what did you think about the look of the show? And there's a bunch of dragons in the show, especially in the back end of the season. Yeah, what do you think about those?
I feel like the CG for the dragons just is a little bit off. It is very. I mean, you can't make dragons look super realistic because they're not real, but the CG of the dragons could probably be a little bit better for the amount of
Hmm.
money they have. But
Right.
the look, there were some shots in this show where I was just taken back. I was like, poof,
Hmm.
this looks gorgeous. So yeah, the entire show was beautiful from start to finish. Minus the, as I
Agreed.
said, the freaking CG dragons, which anytime you have people flying in the sky on a saddle, it looks so CG slash green
Yeah.
screened that it's not funny. But hey, I will ignore that because it makes up for it for literally every other scene. It's just gorgeous.
Well, I would also add there that I think even the last thing where it was a lot of that green screen writing, and especially children, it makes it a bit harder to sell that. I think it still worked for me because I did notice like this takes me out just a slight bit, but the tension was so beautifully done. I think in in a lot of scenes, if there's a dragon in it, is about to like snatch a little 12-year-old boy in half, or if it's just like a meeting around the king's or this is like the king's what's it called, like the king's table or whatever, when the bunch of people there with the hand and all of them
The court,
giving the
King's Court,
court.
whatever it is.
I think the king's court, yeah, is probably, I don't know if that's like the specific name that they use here, but you know what I mean. Like those scenes are also like really tenseful because you don't really know sometimes where people skew, like how harsh they'll be. And there's a lot of like really quick, unexpected deaths in this season, which don't really feel impactful because it's usually, you know, adversaries that go against some of our main characters. I wouldn't call them protagonists because they all got a bit of pro and con or antagonist in themselves. Man, I think the kills were kind of visceral in the show, where it's really gruesome and they don't cut away. I don't remember that being the case with Game of the Throne with Game of Thrones as much. Some memorable kills in the show as well.
You know what stood out to me?
What stood out to you?
Stood out to me was one performance in particular, and
Yes.
that's Paddy Considine's performance as
Yeah,
King Viserys. My God, does he
Viserys.
do a
Yeah,
great job?
I think I agree because he kind of really nails that old frail guy who just wants everyone to get along in a sense and have a peaceful reign over his whole thing. And what did you like most about his performance then? His
Oh,
character or
just how
like
he
especially his portrayal?
transforms. The, the
Right.
the the portrayal, how he transforms from this very powerful king to this frail man, and does it perfectly every single time
Mm-hmm.
that you see him on screen. And even his death was fucking stunning as well, just so perfectly executed.
Maybe let's talk about his death because you know that leads to the whole thing in episode 9, right, where Allison kind of misunderstands. That's the issue. If you name all of the children kind of the same name, it does get complicated. Who sits on the
Mm.
Iron Throne? What's his name? Amond or Aemon? One of the
Aemond.
A's, Aemond, which is a kid that Rhaenyra has, and also is the kid that Alicent and Viserys had, right? So that's where it gets. So that's where
Well, no, no,
the
sorry.
issue lies.
He says Aegon should be
Oh,
uh
Aegon, that's him.
king, because
Yes,
Aemon's the pirate.
is the older one, this pirate character who also I think is like obviously the antagonistic character for the two kids because he's so angry. But I think after that encounter where he loses his eye, there's a rightful anger to that. Obviously, like to claim an eye
Hmm.
for an eye is a bit extreme, but I do get like why he's so angry. Obviously, because he did lose an eye, but also him like not being able to control his dragon in that last moment is like, you know, there's this things beyond the control of these characters, and you can really see that he's probably not ready for the repercussions, especially in the moment. Obviously, has to live with them and make do, and I guess go into full gear and fight them. Obviously, he probably doesn't mind as much. But do you think we'll also see like leading characters in this next season on the battlefield themselves? Someone like Aemond?
Yeah, I'm sure I will see a head to head with some of the kids, probably the eldest, going at each other.
Yeah,
That's who I can see definitely on the battlefield, but I don't think there will be. I also don't think there will be at the same time, because there's no
yeah.
point for them to fight. They're royalty. They don't need to get their hands dirty. So they're not. Oh
Well,
god, now his name's gone from
maybe
me. Uh
the other one,
John, he's not
the
they're not they're none of them are Jon Snow. None of them are gonna get their
right.
hands dirty. They're all practically kings and princes and knights. They're gonna have get their dirty work done by their armies.
Because
Maybe
they're
they'll fly a
Christian.
dragon or two, but you know, the
Yeah.
only one that's so far gotten their hands dirty is the Driftmark's
Or the guy who killed
king,
his
Lord
old
Corlys, and
Corlys, yeah.
Daemon. That's it.
Yeah,
They're the only ones who've gone to war. So
I think he's also Damon has kind of his character I find really interesting as well because he goes from this like hotshot character who's ready to take everyone on to someone who's kind of always looking for the fight, but he's also not really looking for anything to gain anymore because he's kind of given up a bit in a sense, and he isn't as like talkative as he was in the first few episodes, which I think is also like the time skips. You can do time skips and then there's time that passed. But I think they did a clever way of changing the characters, obviously like changing the cast with the younger ones, which I think is a bit more of a stretch that I'd have had to get adjusted to for like 2 episodes before I was like okay with it. But his character just undergoes something a bit more subtle that I found really interesting as well. So an MVP for a lot of people, kind of thirsting over Damon, which is kind of weird because he's not really a good like partner, I'd say. But I've seen a lot of stuff
no,
in the
but he is
reactions
the
for it.
he is the emo lord goth boy of the series. So
He is the bad boy of the series for
I want someone
sure.
to do
Yeah,
a super cut of all of his like how he
yeah.
does like a lot of those.
Yeah, I want a fan cam of Damon. Well, I think that Otto Hightower, the hand that isn't the hand anymore, and then he gains back his hand as the hand, uh, is an interesting character to follow along as well because I feel like there could be theories around like the Maesters keeping Viserys sick and like a lot of that stuff that goes on in the background that we don't really see, but then gets alluded to not as like openly as the bastard children of Rhaenyra, but it's something that's also there, and I loved it that like seed is kind of planted where you don't really know um how calculated the high towers are at times. Yeah, I just look through it the naive lens of just Alicent and Rhaenyra's friendship that I kind of just want to rekindle. Let's all be friends, and but that's not going to happen in Game of Thrones, which is a pity. I think that's also what I kind of want from a show like this, where it's not like where you're not gashing over or like you're really enthralled by the violence. It's obviously like a means to an end, and it kind of keeps things interesting and keeps your attention. But if the characters like are actively seeking it out, if they don't then contemplate what that actually means or like how they stay in their power, which I think the series does this quite well, then I'm not as interested in it. So
Mm.
I'm just a big fan of season 1 of House of the Dragon. Uh, I thought the season was stellar. You thought that the back end, especially the last 4 episodes, were the highlight of the series. Now
Mm.
it being continued into season 4, into season 2 in 2024. Hopefully, we'll get it then. It's gonna take about 2 years of production. Where do you see the story go, or what do you want to see in a season 2?
I want to see dragon fight, and I
Yeah,
want to see hand to hand combat. That's all I want.
right. Lots of fighting. Yeah, looking forward to that as
I'd
well.
like some action. That's all I want.
Yeah, a little more action. I think that the scale of the dragons was something that I wasn't really aware of, like how much bigger Aemon's dragon is over the little bastard child. I don't know, I forgot his name. Um, that he feels like a flying donkey compared to Aemon's dragon. So yeah, a bunch of grown-up dragons going at it is gonna be sick, and it's something that we I think haven't seen yet, or maybe we got like did we get like a like revived zombified dragon fight in Game of Thrones? I don't remember if that
Yeah, there
like
was.
was dragon on dragon. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, a bit more of that. Looking forward to that. And I think that brings us to the end of our review, Lachlan. So if you had to rate season 1 of the show, what would you arrive at as a rating?
I'd give it an 8.
an 8 out of 10 for me as well. A really solid season. I went back and similar to you, I had a couple of episodes that I ranked like a 7, but then there were a bunch of 9s and 8s. So averaged around an 8 for me as well. So a warm recommendation from us. It's streaming over on HBO or maybe some other streaming services that do take on that. Here in Switzerland, it's Sky, I think. And for you, is it also on HBO or is it on something else?
Some binge in Australia.
On binge. So go binge the show if you may. And we'll be back. We got a weekly podcast with a big review each week, and we cover the news. So if you want to go check that out, please do. Comes out every Tuesday. We'll be back with season 2, I guess, of House of the Dragon, but you'll have to wait a long while until 2024 until we get to that. But yeah, in the meantime, you can follow us on our socials. Those are linked below. There's a link tree for the Quiet on Set podcast, and all of our personal links are down there as well. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon. Cat Cam is back. Hello.
Cat.
He was on my table. He was on my table.